Nothing to do.
That's why I recused myself at the last meeting.
Yeah, let's call this meeting to order. And before we really get started, let's welcome Randy Lewis to the commission.
Thank you. Thanks for including it.
So now we are 7. With that said, roll call, please.
Rob Wilkerson,
Here.
Jeff Perry,
Here.
Will Harris,
Here.
Mike Hill,
Here.
Brad Carlberg,
Here.
Harry Arcieri,
Here.
Randy Lewis.
Here. All right, so we have a forum. Approval of our meeting on this June 17th. Has anyone had any comments provided to the staff?
Two. On page 3. Did I say rectify or reconcile? Reconcile has been a word I've been using. I can live with
You
it,
want to change that to reconcile?
please.
Okay,
And then last but not least, at the end there, I think we dropped a Y on my last name because it says care make motion.
all right.
But those-
Have staff do those revisions. So we'll entertain a motion.
I motion we approve the minutes with 2 changes at King of the Road, word rectified or reconcile, and adding a Y at the end of Brad's last name.
Second? Anybody?
Jeff's last name.
Jeff's last name. You- The brother.
I'll second it.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. And does anyone have any revisions or changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Who wants to move on this one?
Motion to approve the agenda as written.
I'll second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest?
Nope.
Nope.
No.
Doesn't sound like any conflicts. Good. Our next meeting is going to be on September 16th, the usual place, the usual time.
I won't be able to attend. Brad Carlberg, I'll be out of the country.
Oh, so you're going to ask for an excused absence, huh?
Yeah,
Good. Where are you going?
I'll get a note from Scandinavia.
Good time before the year to go there?
I think so. September should be fine. There's a conference of the Scandinavian Simulation Society.
Well, do have fun when you go there.
Yeah,
All right.
I need a note from my mom that I signed. Okay.
Any committee or staff updates?
So in October, the plan is to bring the short-term regulations back for a public hearing. So the VOCC has already decided on the need for those regulations and a basic outline. So the goal for the PAC is to point out any areas we need to have more refinement or detail to those regulations. So we're going to bring them back in October for a public hearing. So be prepared for that in October, and then September meeting, the capital improvement program. So the draft and the recommendation letter will be coming on the September 16th, as well as we are looking at bringing the critical areas ordinance checklist for the PAC to review.
So we're going to be busy.
Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. We are still waiting on our SCJ Alliance person. She's on her way,
Mhm.
so 6:30-ish is about the time.
So she'd be physically present.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well,
We're here to give the presentation.
The FCS group.
okay.
Can I ask a question on the short-term rental? So we have a public hearing then in September,
October.
October.
Yeah.
And are there any expectations of the Board of Commissioners as to when the PAC will provide something back to them?
So the public hearing in October that's when you would be expected to make your recommendation in October. After the public hearing.
Okay,
All right. All right, any other business, if any? Okay, hearing none, we're gonna go to the public comment. Says, on topics associated with the mission of the planning commission for which a public hearing is not being held. And it says, of course, please limit comments to 3 minutes, and we need to kind of adhere to that, guys. And for the public. We kind of let it go on June, and we kind of went a little bit long, and it was brought to my attention.
I think you have somebody who wants to speak back here.
Hello, everyone. For those of you, I think most of you know me already, but in case you don't, I'm Julianne Gale. And I'm the Executive Director of Mason County Climate Justice. And I'm pleased to share that we did receive the Department of Commerce grant that allows us to get the public involved and to support the really important work that you all are doing. And one of the ways we wanted to show our gratitude for the work that everyone has put in and have a gesture of goodwill and collaboration is that we brought Skokomish grilled king salmon and salad, and everyone is welcome to help themselves. There's more in the cooler as well. I just didn't want to put everything out right now. And we're so excited to meet with you one-on-one and in the group meeting, and whatever we can do to support your important work, we'd love to do. And I just want to give a special shout out. This group is called Cosmic, or they name themselves the Cedar Stewards of Mason County. They're Cedar High School students, and they're here to learn and also as our youth leaders and youth voices when we're talking about the next 10 years and 20 years of our planning. There's nothing more important. So thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay. Any additional comments from the public? All right, hearing none. We go to the public hearing. Capital Improvement Program. Any staff report?
So not really a report, it's just an update on where we are with the process with the committee. So the draft CIP was posted online, and the subcommittee has had 2 of their 3 meetings. The last meeting, the subcommittee met with department staff to discuss the projects that they provided for the capital improvement program. So they have one more meeting, which is actually this week, where they will be forming their topics for a recommendation letter to the Board of County Commissioners. Today's purpose is to give the public a chance, if they have any comments on the capital improvement program draft, to give them a chance to voice those comments. And then, like I said earlier, we will be then bringing the draft and the recommendation letter to the September PAC meeting for the PAC members to take action on as a whole. And then I don't know if the subcommittee was planning on sharing anything from those meetings or not, or if they wanted public comment to take place.
At this point, because we had one public comment, we want to take that in and then have, the committee hammer it out before we report back and say, okay, this is our finding, or, this is what we're recommending.
Do we want to, after public comment, give the board a heads up as to where we're sitting right now? I think it'd be useful.
I'm game. I mean,
I just want to make sure that we don't walk back in with a, you gotta be kidding me, guys. I want to feel that the folks have, yes, we're sort of headed in the right direction. I don't want to get a hard no when we come back. I think once we hear public comment, you know, somewhere between the three of us, we can sort of sum up where we believe we're sitting right now.
I'm game either way. It's the chair, I'm more than happy to give some summary of what.
Well, would it be beneficial for you guys to meet and finalize things before you bring it to the public's attention, or you wanna invite even more comments?
It seemed like it's like making sausage. Probably want to get it, nailed down somewhat before we, or, hear what public also is saying. And then, use that as part of our, guidance in what we recommend or don't recommend.
And because what you guys have been doing is sort of unknown to a lot of people,
Right,
and you're gonna be getting a lot more questions as opposed to having a more finalized product. that You
Right.
can demonstrate, put into a PowerPoint or something, people can read.
I agree.
So how is the general public able to get a hold of like this draft and other documentation? How's that being sent out, or people know that even exists? How's that working?
So it's posted on the planning commission website. The agenda and the draft was posted on there. I also let the comp plan list group know that this meeting was taking place and that the draft was available.
It's also in the paper too.
Yes, and
So-
it's in the paper.
Okay, so if anyone wants to access it, they need to go into the county website and find us. That's sort of how it's.
Yes, sir, they can email.
Oh, okay, thank you.
All right, so why don't you guys just next time,
Pardon me?
bring this stuff forward next time.
Yeah,
Okay.
if agreeable, I'm agreeable. Thanks.
All right, so is there any questions for staff?
We have to do public comments, public hearing.
All right, I know I'm getting there. I'm going through my little list here. And so now we have come to the public testimony portion. And when you come in and speak to it, please come up to the podium and clearly identify your name, because we got people online and the speaker is over there. So where the microphone is, excuse me, so.
Hello, Julianne again. I was just curious about why the funding for trail development and the Shelton to Belfair Trail Program was cut. I also wanted to express gratitude for stormwater management, habitat improvement, capital expenditures. I'm glad to see that that's happening.
What was that trail again?
So both in the table 9, parks, recreation, open space and trails, the North Bay Trail Project is totally cut. And so is the trails development and Shelton to Belfair Trail Program. And I
Thank
was
you.
just curious about what that was and why it was cut.
Well, from my understanding from the Parks and Trails Department, so it's not necessarily, it's cut for this cycle because it was found to be feasible for this budget cycle, but it doesn't mean it's cut indefinitely.
Can you say anything more about what made it infeasible?
Lack of a defined path, money to actually complete the project. Right, it should be. And for the public, I'm Mark Neary, I'm the county administrator. Mark Neary, I'm the county administrator.
Thank you.
What else? Anybody online have any comments for the public section? Wow.
I'm not seeing anybody. I mean, I've seen lots of people, but not any hands.
Oh, boy. Well, I guess.
Next topic,
Pardon me?
next topic.
Well, we're on item number 3, public hearing, so I guess. There's no more comments from the public. We'll move on to the work section. Item number 4. This is the 2025 Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update, reviewing the draft countywide planning policies and draft housing needs assessment, SJC Alliance and FCS group to be presenting. Staff report?
Did you get the presentation?
Give me just a minute.
Okay, so. And
Older version.
does anyone have any questions for the staff, by the way, too? Seeing none, all right, we'll wait for the presentation to come up.
We're talking the 71-page Appendix A, correct?
No, we've moved on. That's the CIP. Brad,
Okay. Is it
yeah, Bob closed,
21 page, chapter 2?
Well, let's see which one. There's there's
there's
the-
3.
Chapter 2 is 21 pages. The draft Mason County
Oh, also
County
21
planning
pages.
policies draft is also 21 pages. So let's see which one we go to.
Well, let's have our presenter do the presentation, and we'll find out. Can everybody online see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. I'm Todd Chase and I'm with Tim Wood from FCS. We're based in Redmond, Washington, and we do housing strategies and work on comp plans throughout the state of Washington and in a few other states in the West. SCJ Alliance is the prime contractor on this, and we were brought in just because we did some work for Mason County a couple years ago on a housing needs analysis with Todd Parker from your health department. And we were looking holistically at housing needs a few years back during the pandemic, actually. And so this was an opportunity to build on that work and update it. And so tonight, we're gonna be throwing a lot of numbers in the air. A lot of these plans, they kind of start with, on one side with a lot of numbers, and on the other side with the community's vision. And then the two are supposed to come together magically in a new comprehensive plan document that has updated policies. So tonight we'll talk about just the housing element of your comp plan. And all the information we have presented tonight, very preliminary. This is really the first time you're getting a chance to see it. First time the public is getting a chance to see it. We did share it last week with the city of Shelton and their council, and got some input from them to share with you as well. So you can kind of hear where they're coming from, because they are the large, the city in the county. So it's very important to have them on board. So next slide, please. We can. The methodology that we use has about 5 steps in it. We'll run through those steps tonight. The design year is a 20-year forecast of Mason County in the future, and how much housing you would need to accommodate the projected population growth in the county. because you are a Growth Management Act compliant county, the state gets involved and the state hands down really the forecast to the counties that are GMA counties. And so we're gonna talk about the state's numbers tonight as well. So yeah, that's good. So the 5 steps. So, yeah, the first step is the demographic and market overview. Tim and I will go over those key findings tonight. Then we'll get into the county-wide housing demand forecast the state handed us. We'll talk about some allocations between, once we have the big picture, we can talk about where that can be accommodated on the ground. City of Shelton, UGAs, and some of the other growth areas in the county and the rural portions of the county as well. And then we're going to get some stakeholder input. As I mentioned, we've already heard from the city. Hopefully we hear from you tonight. And then we'll revise the housing allocation assumptions based on what we hear in terms of feedback. Next slide, please. So some of the key findings, we're going to go over these in detail, but these are just the highlights. The county is forecasted to add about nearly 15,000 additional residents over the next 20 years. And all those people are going to need a home. And so as we go through this, we're going to talk about how many housing units we're going to need to accommodate all those people. And also we have to look at it by income level as well now. So we're going to talk about housing needs by income. The other thing about that's unique to Mason County is about 1 in 4 homes are currently owned by a seasonal or part-time resident throughout the county. City of Shelton, not so much, but the rest of the county definitely. So you see that in a lot of more, resort-oriented and other types of communities like that that are highly attractive. We see a lot of investment by second homeowners. And that's certainly the case here. So, but it makes it a challenge to provide housing for the year-rounders that are here because you have a lot of other investors driving up the home prices. So you almost have to keep a step ahead of the housing demand to keep it more attainable for the permanent residents.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So looks like you've done a single demographic projection. The way I understand the comp plan, does that include just one demographic projection, or how does that work? Does this get plugged into that, whatever the final number is?
Right. We've been assuming a middle growth forecast for the county. The state gives us a low, a medium, and a high for population. And right now we're assuming the middle because that seems pretty optimistic. And the low seems pretty pessimistic. So, and the high is way off the charts.
So in whatever work we do, are we required to use the state's 3?
Yeah.
But if we want to do further analysis, you've got to keep us for looking at different ones.
You can always, we're going to talk about
Well, may not end up in the
Randy,
official
Yeah.
product, right? Okay.
we have one forecast that goes a little bit beyond the state's forecast, which we think is what the market really wants to see.
Okay.
And it is a little higher than the state's number. And then, as you know, when you're aiming for a target long range, you always want to shoot a little bit higher than the target. And that's kind of the way we like to, recommend it.
Got it.
So we'll talk.
Randy, let's let him go through the presentation if you have any questions.
Yeah, these are great
Later.
questions.
Yeah, we want to get through this.
Yep, okay, great. We're gonna walk through this. There tend to be larger families living in the city of Shelton, smaller families, aging in place in the rural parts of the county. We have seen since the pandemic anyway, income levels surprisingly have been keeping up with rent levels, which we don't see around the country very often, certainly not in a lot of places in the rest of the Washington state anyway. But about half of the households are income constrained. And we'll talk about that as we get into this. Over the past 5 years, the county as a whole has permitted about 382 new housing units every year for the last 5 years on average. So you are seeing a lot of permitting activity. It's probably slowed down the last year as building activity has slowed down with higher interest rates, but that's a healthy sign of growth there. And we're going to talk about the housing market in terms of kind of 3 types of housing. There's standard detached homes, which tend to be, people with better, higher income levels. You have a lot of manufactured homes and mobile homes in the county. We'll talk about that. And there's a need for what we call middle housing, which tends to be 2 or more units per structure. They tend to be a lot of more rentals than ownership options. And so we're going to talk about that. You haven't seen a lot of that in the city of Shelton yet, but there's a lot of demand for it. So next slide, please. And so Tim, why don't you run through some of these key demographic trends? And this is the one that shows the medium forecast. The low really had a very low number, not even really worth talking about. And the high was way high. And you can see the trend, the average trend, we've been going on a little less than 2% per year, and the state has us growing a little faster than that. So.
Right, so for the record, Tim Wood with FCS Group as well. What you're looking at here, that's, as Todd said, that's the medium growth forecast from the state. You got a low, you got a high. Higher is obviously much higher than this. The low is essentially flat. So medium seems like the best option for us, just to make sure that as the county grows, that we have a forward-looking plan and we're not assuming no growth. You can see here where we circled it 68,131. That's the existing estimate as of this year. And what the medium trend shows is that by 2045, the county will have about 83,000 residents. So quite a bit to plan for over the next 20 years. Let's go to the next slide. This is backward looking, so your historic population growth figures, kind of across the county with Washington as a comparison here. So you can see that countywide, we've grown at about 0.75% per year on average, with a lot of that growth based in unincorporated Mason County. That's 0.84% annual growth, so it's a little higher than the county average. You're seeing a much higher average in Allen, but you're starting at a much lower number, so that probably looks a little distorted. Compared to Washington State, we're growing a little over half as quickly, with 1.3% annual growth in Washington over the last 13 years. So, pretty well in line with kind of where our expectations would be, and pretty well in line, I think, with what the projection that we're showing shows. So, and yeah, as another thing to really point out here is that within the city of Shelton and the Shelton UGA, we're looking at between 0.45 and 0.48 annual average growth. So it's pretty significantly lower than the countywide average. Let's go to the next. As we look at these projections, we like to take a peek at what is driving the growth here. So within Mason County, City of Shelton, and Washington State is what we're looking at here. This is the general breakdown of generations, so population by generation. So you can see within Shelton, that's the pink bar there in all of these. Gen Z way higher in Shelton than in both the state and the county. So what we see there, that's likely families largely concentrated there in Shelton. Countywide, you've got a higher average of baby boomers and silent generation residents than the state and the city averages. So you're looking at probably a slightly older demographic within the county. Let's go to the next slide. Really crucial one to keep track of as we project housing needs is average household size. So you can see countywide, pretty much dead center with the state, 2.54 people per household. In Shelton, you can see that's nearly 3 people per household. So again, kind of validating that assumption. Okay, we're seeing more families in Shelton. We're seeing less families outside the city of Shelton. So good to know there. And as we look at the differential between unincorporated or UGA, other UGA county growth versus Shelton growth, that's just gonna play a role as we look at projections. Go to the next slide. Another really important thing to understand as we project out need, especially from a unit type perspective, what's on the ground now. So this is countywide. You've got a little over 3/4 of all of your housing stock is in single family detached. That's pretty standard, especially for non-urban counties in the Pacific Northwest. What's kind of interesting is you've got 18% of your housing units in manufactured home and other types. So a good look at that, and that's really great from an affordability standpoint. So it's great to see that kind of already existing. And then you've got just a smattering of townhomes, plexes, and multifamily in there. So not a huge part of the county's overall housing unit structure. Let's quickly go to the next one. The next one shows just Shelton. So we're zooming in. It's obviously a subset of the county, but you see, slightly lower there, about 9% lower among single family detached. Much higher there for townhomes, plexes, and multifamily. You're at 13% for townhomes and plexes, 12% for multifamily, and then a much smaller share is manufactured homes, although it is still pretty high. Let's go to the next. As Todd mentioned earlier, we wanted to take a look at poverty and income restrictions for folks in the county, and one way we like to look at that is using United Way's ALICE data. That stands for Asset Limited Income. Income constrained and employed, sorry, that's a lot, which is basically a measure of, okay, maybe you're making above the federal poverty threshold, which is something like $27,000 a year, but are you able to really afford to live in the place where you live? Utilities and groceries and all that kind of stuff included. So here what we're showing in the blue, that's federal poverty, so below that $27,000 mark. Then that green bar that's sort of in between, that's your ALICE household. So people who aren't in poverty, but who are asset limited and income restricted. And you can see here, Mason County looks really similar to the state. Slightly higher poverty population, slightly higher ALICE household population, but not significant. Within Shelton, it's very different. You've got basically double the poverty households and nearly double the ALICE households. So that's a really important thing to consider as we look at housing needs inside of the city of Shelton. Let's go to the next. Something that we heard from our partners at SCJ is that there's interest within the county about where folks are coming into the county from. So this shows data from the 2020 year of IRS data that shows where folks are coming from. So these orange counties you're looking at, those are ones that are sending residents to Mason County. So you do have folks coming in from all over the country, as far as Georgia and Florida and Virginia, but you see the concentration is mostly within Washington State, and it's hard to see, but if you really zoom in there, you can see within Pierce County, and I think that might be Thurston County. Those are where you're seeing the biggest shares of folks coming into the county from. You're also seeing a lot in Arizona, which is a bit weird to me, but okay. Let's go to the next one, which shows the same data, but in a bar chart. Now, this isn't every county that we're seeing on that map, but it's your top, I think, 15 or something. So you can see here, Kitsap sending the most people at 944. Now, this is again for 2021. So we recognize that the data is sort of lagging, but this is the best we can do with what we've got right now. And so you're seeing a lot, again, from predominantly your Puget Sound counties, right? Kitsap, Thurston, Pierce, and King, those are all those tall ones, those top four. So that's where you're seeing the most in-migration from. And then the next two, also Washington counties. But then you start kind of getting into these odd ones like Maricopa County, San Diego County, Multnomah County, Oregon, Clark County, Washington, and a couple other Washington ones there. So again, you're seeing a lot of that in-migration come from this area, but you are seeing some from around the country. And let's go to the next slide. And I think that's where I tag Todd back in. There you go.
Interesting, yeah. So there's basically three forecast scenarios we want to talk about tonight. The first two come from the state of Washington Department of Commerce. They have this new housing planning tool they're using for the GMA counties. We're going to see the results of that. We call those scenarios A and B. And then we have a hybrid scenario C, which we tend to develop when we don't have anybody hand us a forecast from the state. Similar to the work we did a few years ago for you. Both scenarios A and B assume about 7,000, little over 7,000 housing units over the next 20 years. And scenario C bumps it up to about 7,645. And so you'll see with scenario C with slightly different assumptions, we do try to budget for the second home buyer more than scenario A and B does. So we do try to, again, aim a little higher than the state's numbers. We do think if you could deliver that many units, people would buy them or rent them. There's no doubt about that. We do have pent-up demand for housing today, so we're aware of that. And so we're going to talk about how these can be more attainable based on income levels. And so next slide, please. So this is showing the projected change in population with the state's housing growth forecast. It has the city of Shelton capturing about 30% of the total growth in the county for inside the city limits, and 70% happening in UGAs and rural parts of the county. Next slide, please. So this is scenario A, and you'll see the way the state breaks it down. This shows a number of housing units. Remember I said 7,000 by income level. And they're showing less than 30% of the median household income in the area, household income from HUD. And then it ranges to over 120% of the area income. And then they have a category called emergency shelters as well. And so on the bottom line for the county as a whole, showing about 78 housing units needed for emergency shelters in the future, about 2,000, 2,100 for kind of non-government assisted, over 120% of the median income level housing. And then on the other extreme, about 1,800 for households earning less than 30% of the income. So those would be definitely government assisted. Everything under 80% tends to be some kind of government assisted with deed restricted housing in terms of how you would plan for future growth. So that's quite a bit of deed restricted housing there. Next slide, please. In scenario B, what the county has done, or the state did, is they allocated the need based on the number of affordable housing units that are on the ground today. So they're trying to show 20 years from now, we're going to have an equal number of affordable units in the rural portions of the county as we do in the city of Shelton. It's kind of a policy thing they do. It's kind of one extreme or the other. The first one is just an equal distribution between the city and county based on current population levels. And this is a distribution based on where the subsidized government housing is today and how they're trying to equalize that distribution in the future. So you'll see the city captures fewer overall dwelling units and definitely fewer subsidized housing units than they did under scenario A. And the county will capture more. To me, it doesn't make much sense because you want to put the housing where the services are, where transit is, where grocery stores are, where schools are, where people can walk. And so, you know, I don't always understand why they do these. I can see politically why they do it, but it doesn't make much sense from a market point of view to do a scenario B like this. But those are the two scenarios that the state wants us to discuss. And then I have one other scenario I'll throw out here. Oh, by the way, so the state gives us housing by income level, but they don't tell us what kind of housing types go with those income levels. So based on our work we've done around the state and other states and other counties, we can kind of assume that on the left-hand side of the chart, when you're earning under 30% of the median income level, you're probably not going to be able to afford a single-family detached home. So the housing units most kind of consistent with the lower income levels tends to be either multifamily plexes or apartments or or manufactured housing. And manufactured housing kind of is a nice kind of middle income level scenario for housing types. And then, of course, detached homes are more consistent with people earning over the median income level. So we assume about 95% of the demand for upper income level being in detached housing, 5% being in condos of some type. And then emergency shelters can be in a mix of housing, mostly multifamily, but we just split it for now, 50-50. So based on that, you end up with a distribution of housing types in the county under method A and method B with about 2,300 detached homes in method A, 2,200 method B, and then more multifamily, slightly more in method B, 3,600, 3,500 method A, and then about 1,230 manufactured homes or mobile homes. As just a way to kind of hit the market based on income levels. It's a lot of multifamily housing in a county that doesn't have a lot of multifamily housing. So that's kind of the trick right now. Next slide. And this is the hybrid scenario I was telling you about. This is the one we came up with, similar to the work we did a couple of years ago, before we had the state's forecast. We basically take the county population growth forecast. We assume the level of group quarters stays the same at about 1.9%. So we'd have about 283 residents in group quarters. Could be transitional housing, but they're also in correctional facilities. Sometimes they're in student housing. Sometimes they're in assisted living facilities. As people age, those become pretty good market drivers. And that comes out of the housing mix. So then we have 14,500 people in households, assuming the same average household size as we have today. 2.5 gives us 5,700 dwelling units. Then we added in the seasonal housing demand at about 24%. So we have a total housing demand of 7,500 plus the group quarters gives us about 7,600. So we're about 600 units higher than what the state came up with this scenario. Next slide. Okay, this is City of Shelton. So similar with Shelton, we have a higher, we have a lower group quarters number, higher average household size number, and we came up with about and lower housing seasonal occupancy number of 6% versus 24%. We came up with 2,900 dwelling units for the city, plus 71 in group quarters, which is pretty consistent with the state's number. So a total of 3,300 units for the city. So two different ways to come at the future housing need. One from the state's model, they cranked the handle, and then this one. So the real question is, how can you allocate this within the city and the county? And the next slide gets into allocation discussion. The allocation takes into account prior adopted plans. The city has done some work around Belfair and an EIS type document. So you've done some forecasts of what that area can support. We've talked to the city, we've talked to some developers as well that are working on projects the north end of the county in Allen area and Union. And we've asked them kind of, where they thought the market would be heading if adequate infrastructure was put into place with sewer, water, and transportation. And they helped us kind of gut check our numbers, basically. And so the housing capture rate for the city and the Shelton UGA combined, we think would be about 41% of the countywide demand. Could be higher if the city wants to grow, probably could be higher. But we'll talk about the input we received from the city in a couple of slides. The future housing capture rate for Allen and Belfair UGAs combined expected to be almost 1/3 of the countywide growth. I know some growth planning has gone into that area already, And so there is potential for the north area of the county to grow, closer to the jobs on the north end of the county, as well. And the rural portions of the county would capture at least 26% of the housing demand, most of that in manufactured housing primarily. Next slide. So this would show how we think the market would react if you have adequate housing supply. Most of the detached homes would go into the Shelton and UGAs. You'd have some detached elsewhere in the county, but mostly manufactured homes elsewhere in the county, in the rural portions. And some minor, hard to see it, but some duplexes as well. But the UGAs and the city and the UGA around the city of Shelton could accommodate about 74-75% of the growth. Next slide. So if we compare hybrid scenario C to the state's forecast scenarios, you see we've said about 7,600 dwelling units of demand over 20 years. State's saying about 7,000 units. We have slightly more detached homes than the state assumed. We have slightly less multifamily housing than the state assumed, and we have more manufactured housing than the state assumed. Just based on the way we see the market kind of reacting to some of these numbers and the developers being able to accommodate the type of housing we're projecting. This manufactured housing number, because it's so big compared to what you have on the ground today, could also be in the form of accessory dwelling units, smaller homes tucked into the back of a detached home on the lot. We're starting to see those in more urban areas around the state. We know the city of Shelton has updated their code to allow ADUs to be developed easier than in the past, but they've only seen about 8 come across the counter in the last few years. So it's still kind of early to figure out how much of this housing demand could be in the form of ADUs. It's probably a few hundred at most. The rest would need to be in new development. This is kind of the different scenarios, and we can talk about what we heard from the city next, if you'd like to hear. Yeah, next thing. Okay, so our takeaway was there's strong demand for single-family detached housing. The cost to extend infrastructure, especially sewer and transportation, is a barrier in a lot of portions of the county. The lack of large buildable home sites has been a constraint in the city of Shelton. And I think they just annexed some land, so eventually that land could be developed, but it's a ways off. The median growth forecast is probably the most reasonable one to aim at. If you can hit it, and we recommend going a little bit above it if we can. And yeah, that's about it. Next slide, please. So here's what we heard from the city of Shelton. So generally, they thought the state's forecasts were rosy, even under the medium forecast. They thought that was optimistic. And going above that, above the 7,037 dwelling units, they thought could be problematic if we're sizing our infrastructure to handle more growth than the market's likely to provide. So that was their concern, that we build more water and sewer capacity than we might need. They did note that the population in the city did decline over the last couple of years. The official census counts did show a decline, and that it's probably going to rebound a little bit this year. And they did think that the census counts were not accurate. They thought there's a lot of undercounting. They did think there's a lot of kind of transitional housing or population that's not being counted in the census numbers. And anyway, that's was their gut feel. They're not sure why the city has been lagging behind the statewide population growth, given all the growth that's gone on in the, you know, Olympia and Tacoma and Sound regions. But they think it's mostly due to a lack of housing supply, so it's kind of the chicken and egg problem. Let's see, they did say there's 630 detached homes and 48 multifamily housing units in the pipeline in the city today. So they expect those units to be permitted over the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years. So there is demand, a lot of demand for detached homes in Shelton. Slightly lower demand for multifamily at present, but when I talked to the developers that build multifamily, they said that's mostly due to interest rates being pretty high right now. They thought there's a lot of demand, but they didn't think, you know, the current market, the bank terms and the cap rates and the rent levels that they could get those projects to pencil. Next slide, please. They did say the city annexed about 400 acres recently. I didn't follow up on this. I don't know how far along they are in planning for that land. Seemed like a pretty big number when they mentioned it. So I don't know much about it.
Yeah. Maybe 40.
Oh, I heard 400. So we'll check on that. Yeah, I was gonna say, well, problem solved. 400 acres? Okay, we'll check on that. They did think that the housing scenario C with 1,259 or so detached homes for the city and the UGA seems very reasonable to them. They also thought that the allocation of about 191 cottage homes or ADUs or manufactured homes seemed very reasonable as well to the city. But they were concerned that the 1670 multifamily units seemed high to the city. I'm not sure where you could accommodate that. You know, multifamily developers do like economies of scale, so they like to see projects, you know, that are at least about 80 units. So they can have an on-site manager, plus, you know, landscaper, full-time on-site. Otherwise, it, you know, becomes hit or miss, smaller units. Hard to pull together those small deals. And you need land to do a big deal. And I'm not talking land, I'm talking about 3 to 5 acres of contiguous buildable land. And it's hard to find those sites currently. Yeah, that's pretty much what we heard. So we're hoping to get some input tonight. We can take that input, we can fine tune our allocation numbers and work with SCJ to prepare the comp plan chapter for housing in the fall. That's the goal. Questions?
Anybody from the commission have questions for these guys?
I have one, but one question. It seems like when we, okay, I'm familiar with the process, been around as a layperson around county planning over the last 25 years. And Alan primarily, but working in the county also. One thing it seems that I noticed lately is that there are very few plats being processed in the county. So how do we make the leap from estimating a population when nobody's platting, you know, lots? And, you know, because to date, the last 30 years, basically, the rural lands have grown way faster than the urban lands. And so I have a feeling, I don't know the exact, but this feeling that somehow our analysis, we're missing the boat somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, you have grown, albeit slowly.
Right?
Um. And the next 20 years, because there aren't a lot of development opportunities that there were 20 years ago, the growth could slow down. Is kind of, what I hear you saying, potentially.
Well, I'm just saying that, to have that type of housing development, you need lots, land to develop on. If it's in the rural lands, you're basically talking, at minimum 2.5 acres, but most of the time 5 acre tracts. There's not that, I mean, there's smaller ones that exist, but they're grandfathered in. So there's that growth, and so that's what our growth has been in those lots to date.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been the big developers, it's been onesie twosie people moving in as coming from the different areas of Puget Sound and elsewhere.
Yeah, well, this is saying that those trends would probably need to reverse. So 75% of the growth would happen around Allen, Belfair, and Shelton. And 25% would be in rural areas. Can those areas accommodate 7,000 units? I think in theory they can. So theoretically, I think it can happen. Will the market do it? I don't know. I don't know if the market will respond. You have to. There has to be, all the utilities have to be kind of in place: water, sewer, power, transportation, for that kind of growth to happen. And I'm not sure that that's the case right now.
Right.
Okay. Okay, Brad or Terry, you got any questions?
No questions, but just a comment that maybe a low growth, personally, the low growth of the county is a plus. I know my neighbors don't want carpetbaggers coming in. We don't want to encourage riffraff coming in to populate the multifamily units.
You're too late.
I'm not politically correct by saying this, but that's so I think we ought to push back on the state and say we don't have to have the growth.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just an old fart, but
Well, thank you for your comments, Brad.
I had a question. This graphic here, this is like the path. I'm just curious, why is it, the class slope is far less than the projected slope, high level? Could you explain the drivers of that?
Can you go to slide 4, please?
Yeah, it's slide number 4, the population growth trend. Those are the Office of Financial Management. They have a very sophisticated econometric model that looks at the growth in the whole region. And we're a component of the region. And so we capture a tiny sliver of the million residents that are moving into the region. That's in a nutshell.
So it may be reflective of the region, but they may not have been granular and looked at us specifically, sounds like.
The growth is the same. There's no change in rate. The x-axis in the first 3 years is extended. And you go from 20 to 2023 to 2024, and then you go in 5-year increments. You shove those first 3 to the right where they need to be, and it's a straight line, single slope.
Right, but the two slopes,
Yeah.
There's
Are not the same.
one slope. X-axis is not consistent.
I do say the state is forecasting higher growth than you've seen the last few years.
oh, I see what you're saying.
But I guess if we were to take that line further back to like 2000, we might see more of the consistent with the long-term trend that they're projecting. It is a planning number. I think we just have to show that we can accommodate this many units somehow. And I think the county can show that with the environment, the EIS planning you've done around Allen and Belfair, or Belfair in particular. I think we can show we can accommodate, in theory, those units. But the city of Shelton and the Shelton UGA need to kind of pick up about 40 to 45% of the total growth. You know, to make this work.
One question on your slide, and I know the slide numbers changed from what we got, but I think it's slide 3. You talk about the number of new housing units, and yet in the estimates for housing units by FMO, it's more like 1,300 odd some odd divided over 4 years.
Well, yeah, if you've been doing 380 for the last 5 years,
And I think the slope.
What I'm trying to say is the number's less,
do you mean their numbers less?
yes. If you use OFMs. Just,
And then the forward-looking projection, if you annualize that over.
well,
2
I'm
years.
looking, well,
Well, that annualized would be.
no, I'm saying adding the 385 new units per year, that was passed. And I'm saying from 2020 to.
Oh.
The report only goes back to 2020, but if you
Okay.
average their 4 years,
Right,
the
that's
numbers-
less than 380.
yes.
Yeah, so you know, it's recognizing that there was a boom. Now, this is housing versus population.
This is
There's
housing,
two different things.
this is housing.
So, and housing doesn't always mean year-round housing.
Fair.
This could be people building seasonal homes.
Fair. I'm just having trouble again reconciling some numbers because you have OFM housing. Not dividing out to the numbers we're using. That's all I can say.
Yeah, the OFM does the population forecast. Department of Commerce does the housing forecast. I don't know if they talk to each other.
All I can say is I got this off OFM. Off the.
Staff have any questions?
So it does
Okay.
seem like maybe that, sorry, I do see a question, but just building on your comment. Do you think that the scenario C that goes above the state's forecast, median forecast, is too optimistic? Like we heard from the city, or do you think that's a good idea to plan above the state's forecast? That's a question.
What I've read so far, and put together, I would concur more with the city of Shelton.
Okay.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I guess, few questions. So key findings, income has been keeping pace with house prices. Not
Not
my
my
neighbors.
case.
I know, this is.
So I guess I really question that, you know, finding E,
Yeah.
I would consider more of an assumption, and I'm not sure. With the folks I hang with and talk to, they would tell me that that's a false assumption, not a finding and a fact.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm gonna bounce a couple other things. So when I look at the Alice homes, you know, and the poverty homes, we're at about 40%. That's on slide, what was originally 10.
Yeah.
And I want to bounce on to also the housing densities, 2.91 on slide 7 in Shelton. And then I want to bounce in there the US map. Do you have any racial demographics of Shelton versus the rest of the county? And is some of that 2.91 cultural in nature? Because when I look at that map, what I see is the southern border. I see agricultural Washington from the east, and I see areas right around us. Do we have, if you will, a larger family culture? Hispanic homes is my assumption. I'm not trying to make any biases here.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to acknowledge and understand what our population might be,
Mhm.
and are we serving our different clienteles, and what are some of the different cultural considerations that we need to look at this?
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. we do some work in Arizona as well, and we do find that. Hispanic communities, populations do have larger family sizes in general.
Yeah.
And it does drive it up, as do Mormons, so
Mhm.
kind of depends on where we work.
I'm just, yeah. So as we move forward with the comp plan, how are we gonna socialize this with the county residents? Specifically, the idea that we are going to sort of equalize in one of these scenarios, the percentage of single family home, multifamily home, and manufactured home. That was, I think, scenario B.
Yeah, that was one of the
Yeah.
state's
So
forecasts.
I would really like to know how we're gonna talk to groups like the UGA in Belfair and Allen, the UGA around Shelton, possibly areas like Union, Alderbrook, and explain to, the Alderbrooks and the Allen areas and Belfair areas that we're gonna increase the multifamily dwellings into manufactured homes. I'd like to understand how that conversation's gonna go.
Well, it's tougher than that too.
I know.
About a half of those homes need to be subsidized.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's another huge question in here. If we go to slide, what was 10? And you look at 40% or Alice homes,
Oh, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
let me just. So well, all right, so if we say that, 30% of our, 80% of our mean income is a $50,000 home. 30% of that is 15,000. And that's what we're gonna cover for a home, all utilities.
Yeah.
How do we do that? I just,
It's not.
we're gonna need big assistance to support that.
Yeah, and right now, there's no mandate that you as a county have to build those homes and make them deed restricted. But the state does want to make sure that you are making it possible. If somebody wants to build a public housing development, you don't have code that says you can't.
Okay.
You have to have zoning that says you can. And that's pretty much the extent of it. Nobody's expecting the county to deliver, 1,000 public subsidized housing units, but they do want to make sure that you can accommodate it on the ground. Potentially, if somebody wanted to come, to Mason County and build these units, if they could get a grant and build, a mixed income development with 30% deed restricted and 70% market rate. And they can get the grant because there's a need, they might be able to get a tax credit and do a development here. Because there's a huge need. And so, if the government somehow had a program with grants, and I know these deals are hard to pull together. They require cobbling together lots of funding pieces, and there's lots of moving parts, but that's what we're facing all around the country, especially in the West Coast, everywhere we work.
Yeah, that kind of confused me too. Oh, sorry.
Were you done, Will?
I'm done, thank you.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
That shows high percentage of people, I guess, poorer or whatever, but the other side, maybe I'm thinking of it wrong. Much higher percentage of projected single-family homes in the city compared to the percentage in the county, if I'm understanding that right. So how could that happen the county looks like it's better off economically than the city, and yet we're showing a projection of a higher percentage of single homes in the city than the county. I forget which slide.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. we don't seem to have a problem accommodating detached housing. You know, when we're forecasting into the future, whether it be in the rural portions of the county or in the city or the UGA. That wasn't a big challenge for us. The challenge was how can we accommodate 3,500 multifamily units is what the state says we need. And I think that is tough. Because the city says they're having a hard time accommodating 1,670, you know, which is a little over half of the multifamily units. And then when looking at your Allen Belfair UGAs and the plane that's gone into that area, we think we think in theory they could accommodate 1,300 multifamily units in those areas. If the sewer's there, I think they could do it.
Not to beat a dead horse, but I would still argue the slope is higher projected than what has happened. I mean, the slope is a slope. Doesn't matter what the scale is.
Accepted.
But it sounds like the number you're required to plug into the final comp plan has to be one of the numbers from the state. Is that true?
Or if we vary from the state, we have a reason. Like if we're not gonna do 3,500 multifamily, we're gonna bump up maybe the manufactured housing category.
So you can put in, say your numbers, as long as you can defend them, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. We
Thank you.
can't, overall, we can't go below the state's number, 7,000 units. But I think.
Why
we
not?
play
Why
with them.
can't we? Why can't we go below that?
Why can't we?
Yeah.
Because we're a GMA county, I think, we're, you know.
So
I
we're
don't know how you
lucky.
change, I don't know how you change things. We have been growing slower than the state, so.
That's a good thing. Because
Yeah.
if we go less than the state, the rest of the state that is being trashed, King and Pierce County and all those other counties, it's bringing in a bad element, raising crime. Home ownership is not a right. Home ownership is a privilege. We don't need to subsidize the whole damn woke culture.
All right, so the commission had all their questions answered.
Not all, but
Well, for now.
For now.
We're here for hours.
yeah.
Okay,
I guess it would be very helpful to understand why Shelton or possibly why Shelton is a higher home density, people per home. Particularly if it's, I'll just say cultural, whatever the factors are. And particularly if we're potentially expecting more folks coming on in, moving in. And, and from two perspectives, one, housing, but also what does that mean for schools and all the other types of services are out there as we put the entire comp plan together. That's a consideration. It applies in transportation too. So I think that's a big one. I really think we need to talk about and look at how we're going to communicate these ideas out to the public. We discussed that here, I think, at the last PAC, and we just acknowledged the challenge. We had like 107 people respond to the survey, but that's it. There's, we've had 3-4, public fairs of sorts. We have not engaged in that in any way. How I think my expectation, based on the folks I've talked to, I think many folks would be surprised to understand this, the chart we're looking at right here, to say, wow, 40% ish of our population, 45% using Mason-wide is, I'll say, income constrained or worse. I think that would be surprising to many, and then say, and yet we're going to proceed forward with housing and what that means, and we're going to distribute that throughout the UGAs primarily. I think that will be a very interesting sell.
Mhm.
Is the constraint related just to rentals or homeownership also?
It's homeownership, it's all homeownership.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Just assume it's housing, whether it's rental,
Right,
buying, whatever. That's,
Good enough, thank you.
I,
All right, well, now I
Thank
think
you.
we should open it to the public.
If you have someone online as well, before I forget to tell you that. And you can go ahead, Karen.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. I understand, I'm sorry, my name is Karen Leaf. I am the Business Development Manager at the Economic Development Council of Mason County. We'll be participating in the comp plan update quite a bit, and specifically with the climate commitment portion of that. I don't see why we can't help get the county together, get the community together to talk about the other components that you have concerns about reaching, the Guatemalan Hispanic communities that are very much a part of our county. My one question is, I understand and see the housing components to this and infrastructure, and I understand that, but I do not see the education. The Enrollment Boundary Committee the Shelton School District Enrollment Boundary Committee has identified July 2023 of a serious lack of classroom space. I think that this needs to really be a part of this overall plan. We see the influx of homes coming, families coming, but our educational piece is a very important component of that. And I want to know if North Mason, Merriam Knight, Grapeview, Shelton school districts have been included in this conversation. I'm hoping that it has, but if I can help at all, let me know. I appreciate all of the hard work and the time that this takes. But those are just the willingness for the EDC to participate in continued outreach to our communities and the educational component to this.
I'm gonna just jump in at this point. I feel bad I was late. I don't know if they let everybody know. So I'm with SEJ Alliance, Kirsten Peterson. And I'm not currently living on the west side. I will be in 2 weeks. I'm moving over here. But I had a 4-hour drive that turned into 6.5. And so I planned to be here at 4 and I turned into 6.5. There's questions that you posed that I could probably help answer. I just wanted you to know that I'm here and I'll kind of like planning policies, but I can address in a way some of the questions you had, but what I think Karen just was asking about with the school districts. Before I arrived, SCJ had reached out to several different entities, including the school districts. We didn't necessarily get good participation from them at that point, but I would imagine as schools gearing up to start again, it'll be a really good opportunity to bring them back into some new conversations. We do recognize that with the surveys that went out, that there were not a lot of people that participated. Now, last week, the same presentation was made to the city of Shelton, and that steering committee brought up some of the same concerns about the different communities and where they really recognize in the population counts. And there's something to be said for just how the census is conducted in general. We have to go with their numbers. It's a requirement, but as we all know, COVID was going on. And then sometimes also, I mean, during COVID, some of the households may not have responded, but you might have had larger households that might not have been prepared to respond, that might have had a fear of explaining how many people were in their household and what that might mean if that information was shared. So the only way to get a real true accurate count is to go out and organize and do that within a community. And that's a big call for any community to do. That said, the numbers that they're presenting, we're going off the best data that's accepted. And we know that it may not be completely accurate, but regardless if it's completely accurate, the fact is we just simply have to plan for an increased population. And what does that come down to? What Karen said, we have to plan for the schools. We have to make sure the infrastructure is in place. We have to plan for housing. And so how do you do that messaging? sometimes, it would probably not hurt to have like a work session on that particular topic, but a lot of times story sharing is where it's at. When you have concerns about bringing in those types of people, I'll admit, I started out in a rental in an apartment and I worked my way up. And so my children today, they can't afford to buy a house. I don't know how I have a son and a daughter sharing an apartment in Ellensburg because they can't go out on their own. So I think, we get out messaging about, well, who's living in the apartments? Is it really going to bring in the folks that there might be a fear of? So it's like, who lives there? Is it somebody working at the grocery store? Telling personal stories is sometimes a way to do it. That's just one method I'm throwing out there, but that's some decisions that need to be made about the messaging that goes out. And since the survey wasn't super successful, figuring out how to do some more outreach, and it could be partly with the school. We have the Mason County Climate Justice Group here, and they were successful in getting a large grant to go out and do community engagement related to climate. But at the same time, it doesn't mean we can't use their same resources and tap into those groups are going to ask additional questions related to all aspects of the comp plan. And I've been in touch with Julianne, and I'm hoping that we can have a good partnership working with them moving forward. But we want to bring it back to your group and make sure you're okay with the methods of outreach. And we tried something that didn't work, and so maybe we need to step back and do a little bit more. In the meantime, though, we will need to decide on some housing allocation because that does inform other work for the comp plan. Like if we're deciding, and I know that Shelton was tasked with, taking on all these multifamily housing. They don't even have multifamily zoning. So that's one of the next exercises we're going to do with them is figuring out where to zone that. So we need to work with them and they understand, but it's, as was already said, you need to just show that if somebody comes in, a developer proposes to build an apartment building, that there's somewhere to do it and they're going to be the ones to do it, not the government. But we just have to demonstrate that they're able to, that there's zoning and there's some land use regulations in place and you have adequate infrastructure. So just kind of throwing into just some of the things I heard and questions that were brought up. And I know I didn't respond to everything, but those were just ideas that were popping in my brain. And
I appreciate that. We had the Economic Development Council had a breakfast in May, and the educational component was brought up to SCJ at that time. And I know what an undertaking this is and how much it is to get all of these things together and get it done. But I really think that I didn't see it tonight. I think we really need to address that. It's just as important as the infrastructure and housing. And then the EDC, again, we are contracted with Commerce to go out and do the community outreach, so we can certainly add different aspects of the comp plan to those gatherings, and we're more than happy to do so.
Well, I think it would be great to get several of us together to plan that out, because I know that we held, so Jay's Hill on here, and for the city of Shelton's comp plan, we did several different focus groups, and the need to reach out to the other populations, different Hispanic populations, and we were given a lot of suggestions of like who to go through the faith leaders and some of the service organizations. So there's a lot of folks and organizations interested in participating in doing that. And so, Karen, I'll definitely be in touch with you and probably pull together Julianne and some of the other folks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You were saying that the survey didn't work. Is that because it was a small response or?
Saying it didn't work, it's just a very small response. And it's when you're looking at the numbers of the entire population versus the response rate, sometimes you're just not going to get more people to respond. And what I heard though is that there was concern from your group about the small response rate. That's still valid information.
We still need to hear from the public.
I'm sorry.
We still need to hear from the public.
It seems like you had to go to the website, which many people didn't know about. I mean, you could reach out in different ways with the same questions and get a bigger sample size. I can say something about the census real quick. I worked for the census last time. And I remember, they were trying to be very meticulous. And I remember went through the woods in Olympia looking for homeless people. So, and as far as the fear factor, there's a Guatemalan community up by the airport, which I went into. And once you convince them, well, first of all, if they're afraid you're gonna turn them into ice, you're not allowed to. You can be fined up to $250,000 and spend up to 5 years in the pokey, so that's not allowed. So all I'm saying is numbers aren't perfect, but they may be better than receiving right now.
I think we need to hear from the public. Please step up and identify yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Jacob. And I am the son of a retired father. And I would wonder how the county would address to keep the housing and taxes low, so someone who's on a fixed budget would be able to stay here. And I also have another concern. As more people move here, I would wonder how we would stop the buses from getting overcrowded and the streets from getting overcrowded, and the sidewalks from getting overcrowded. And how many people are gonna use that stuff?
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just have a quick question that.
You gotta go to the podium.
Linda Links, what is emergency housing? Is that like the civic center? If there's an earthquake, people can go there? You mentioned emergency housing.
Yeah, I was in the state's forecast of housing, they call it emergency shelters.
Yeah.
In shelters.
Like
Yeah.
domestic violence shelter.
Oh,
or
domestic
shelter.
violence. Okay.
Kind of thing. Thank you.
Climate related.
Well, we should think about that too.
I have a comment too after her.
You can go ahead, I'll go after.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that I have a real estate brokerage, so I get to hear all the stories of why people are buying houses and their concerns over the price of houses. And a lot of people, and that graph kind of demonstrates this, that Generation Z and the boomers are the two biggest populations. And a lot of people are considering generational housing. Like they have their grandparents sell their house and they going on a house together, maybe with a mother-in-law house or an ADU. And that way the kids can kind of help out the parents as they're aging. And it's a good resource. Also, Washington State just enacted a new law about co-living. And with co-living, you can have many more than 6 unrelated people living together. So they're starting to loosen up regulations. And I know that it's trending across the US, or it's kind of like pad split. I don't know if you've heard of pad split, where they have like one community kitchen and a community living area, and then they rent out a bunch of bedrooms. Maybe it's a house that has 6 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms, like 6 master suites. And then people like traveling nurses, and there's other ways that people find to create housing, and people are pretty resilient. And so I think even though that the prices are high, they come up with ways to cohabitate and to find housing.
Well, thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
Speaking to the question about demographics, something that might be really helpful to this commission is the Washington Environmental Health Disparities Map put out by the Washington State Department of Health. It gets down to the precinct level and we'll compare it across the state. And so you can actually see where the income challenges are, where the challenges are with high cost of transportation, where you have higher percentage of youth, higher percentage of elders. And that's the kind of thing I think we should consider in our housing needs assessment, because I'm interested in not just, who are the folks who are going to move into our community, but who is already here that doesn't have the housing they need. Who are the folks who are living in shifts sharing rooms because some people work the night shift and some people work the day shift. Who's in overcrowded housing, who's couch surfing, who's on the streets, who's in the forests, without shelter. And it has an impact on all of us, if not everybody has housing. And I just want to point out some just basic numbers. If we have 24% of our housing that people aren't living in full time, and we have 68,000 people or so, that's like 16,000. That's 16,000 people, which is higher than the 14,000 that are projected to move in. So we really have an opportunity as a county to think about how we're incentivizing one house or one apartment, that everyone gets one place to live before anybody gets two. And I think that policy can happen in terms of home ownership, and that policy can also happen in terms of short-term rentals, so that there's more availability for long-term rentals, especially at the county level. I mean, the city is different because there aren't as many seasonal folks, but at the county level, we don't actually have a housing shortage. We have a housing distribution issue where some people have more than they need and can possibly, because you can only live in one place at a time. I really appreciate, Kirsten, your and Karen, the thinking about schools and the thinking about the additional outreach that needs to be done. I would guess that the McKinney-Vento liaisons would be really helpful, because they're working with the homeless youth, and will have some insight into housing needs. I'm really hoping, let me see. I would agree also with the folks who are saying that income and housing are keeping pace. I think maybe we're having higher income people move in, but I certainly have not had my income keep pace with housing by any stretch of the imagination, and most people I know, that is not true for them either. And then on this document, since it's still a draft, on the housing needs assessment document, I would just request that we consider the definition of low density housing, because currently low density housing is defined as 3 to 5 dwelling units per acre. And as folks pointed out, we have places that are one house per 5 acres, RR5 or RR2.5, and that should be considered in how we're planning things. And then on that graph that was causing so much confusion, it would be really helpful if the x-axis stayed consistent, so that even if there is a slope increase because the state is requiring a projected higher increase, we can actually see what that is and understand it better. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And let's try to limit ourselves 3 minutes, please. I think we're gonna.
So my name is Constance Gibson and I live in Union, which I learned last month was going to be considered as a UGA, and barely believe it because we have no infrastructure. So what I think is important when I'm looking at these kind of materials to kind of analyze and what's happening, it's really important to have facts and the truth. So when we're talking about Shelton and what kind of housing and what can they have, well, what is their sewer capacity to hook up now? There's always, anyway, you need to know what their facility, what they can handle, how many sewage connections, how many water connections. That's a reality point before you start talking to people about what's gonna go in. I mean, and because I wanna say that I do not want to subsidize one other failed housing development or some scheme out there. I cannot afford it. I do not believe the county can afford not only the money, but all the people that are employed to go out to our utilities all the time. I don't believe that county can afford it. So if somebody wants to come in and develop a big development, they're going to have to pay for that in advance. It's like, I remember in 2000, still color craning GMA maps. And I think Carrie, you remember some of that. And people said to me, I go, and then they go, oh, well, I don't do infrastructure. Oh, okay. So, and there's other people who have then since served as county commissioners who in other meetings as in another capacity would say, it doesn't matter. The developer will develop wherever they want to, and it's up to the county to provide the infrastructure. I'm hoping that is no longer something that's true, but that has been out there in our culture. And we have to stop doing that. Yeah, we really have to do that. No more failed and undercapitalized housing developments, please. So I look forward to the work of with the capital facilities plan, because I think if that's a realistic document, then it'll help inform everything else. So thanks, Jeff, for working on that.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Well, sounds like we've pretty well done things this evening, unless there's any other things or something that somebody wants to bring up.
I think we have the planning policies to go through. We've gone through all the housing,
Yeah,
don't we?
We do, but I want to make sure the consultant have like they need.
Yeah, I've got the countywide planning policies to run through with you. I think it was on your agenda first, but since I was late, you did the housing first.
Right.
Yeah, we heard enough input tonight to help us reconvene. Thank you.
Let me grab my water bottle real quick.
So with that said, where do we go from here? Adjourn?
Planning.
We got one more document.
Yeah.
Another 21 page.
Merry
Sorry.
Christmas.
He wants to forget it.
She's trying hard.
Just stand at the podium or wherever you want.
As long as we can hear you, we don't care.
Mike is on the table there. Well, can you hear if I stand over there? Might be a little bit easier.
Well, the mic is up there.
Yeah.
Okay, but on the table. Okay. I will just share my screen here. I'm already on your Zoom. And I'll just go through the curriculum planning policies. I won't read it to you verbatim. What did you say? There's 21 pages. Are you caught on to that? So. We've been going through an exercise, SCJ Alliance with staff. We first looked at the countywide planning policies together with your staff. And then some suggestions for edits were made. So we're working off the existing ones as a baseline. After staff went through it, we had a meeting with some other intergovernmental agencies and made some more edits. And so we wanted to just present it to you. You have an opportunity, you can listen to me speak tonight, but you can go home and think about it some more. And if you have some suggestions, you can add to it later. But also as we're going, I can make edits as well, but let me pull this up really quick. And I'll just kind of describe it as we go. Do I have permissions to share a screen? You should. Okay. Okay. So I'm not going to get it any larger because as I scroll through, there's going to be comments on the side that I'd like you to be able to see. Okay. Let's see. It's like a big one. So right now, this is chapter 2 of your comprehensive plan. And countywide planning policy is a way to work with your jurisdiction, which, you know, this county only has one jurisdiction, which is unique in the state. So it just kind of governs how you operate together. And I'll say that you guys are doing a great job. There are sometimes counties and cities that don't cooperate as well. And you guys have a fabulous arrangement with your current staff members that any development in the UGA, you know, there's some cooperative efforts there. So that's a great thing. So this is page 1, and I'm just going to kind of scroll through it. And you have a table of contents. And essentially, you've got 15 different planning policies that are touched on, they're required by the state with GMA. And so you guys developed some really robust planning policies in the past, and we've just simply gone through and made edits. And so this is in track changes. And it's been going on for a couple of months, just making some edits to this. And I'm not gonna go through the ones that are not really substantive. I'll try to point out the ones that are more so in nature. But here, there's this excellent crosswalk. It's a countywide planning policy and how it relates to your development regulations and the comprehensive plan. So you'll see over here, for example, that in chapter 3 of the land use element, or chapter 3 is the land use element of the comp plan, and it refers over to these specific development regulations of the code. And then it refers also to number 1, urban growth planning policy. And then there's some policy statements. So it just kind of gives you some, that's called a cross section. And then we are adding 2 additional ones. Chapter 12 is going to be added for climate resilience because that is a requirement of the state. It's really a focus on how to plan for natural hazards. And then we're proposing to also add just reference to the existing shoreline master program. So those are going to be included. And I'm gonna get it down slightly so you can see the comments on the side. And then it goes into an introduction. It just talks about the county in general, gives some basic facts. There's a few data that we need to update in this section about square miles, etc. A little bit more is added about climate from a general perspective. And as you go through the document, you're going to see that it kind of narrows in for further focus as you go through it. This gives you a history of public engagement and talks about how the original ones were adopted. And then we go into a table that was developed quite some time ago, and it just lists several different plans that were looked at and analyzed to help support the creation of countywide planning policies. So we've had a lot of feedback and making sure we have the most updated plans referenced. And as you guys look through this, you might even recognize plans that, hey, maybe this was left out. So for instance, we've added the Mason County Hazard Mitigation Plan. A very recent one was adopted in 2023, so that's up to the top. It was pointed out to us that we should be adding the 2017 Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan. And in one of our discussions, it was brought up that the Puget Sound Federal Task Force Action Plan could also be added in there. So that's from 2022. And then we were able to get the most current homeless plan. It's 2019 to 2024. And those are always 5-year plans to end homelessness as required by the state. Housing needs assessment, we've got that one in there. And then honestly, as we finalize this current one, we can update that as well. And then we have down here for stormwater, the Belfair UGA 2018 Basin Plan. Transportation, we have an Allen Circulation Plan from 2017, and then a bridge report from 2024. A Belfair Mobility Plan from 2018 and a Belfair Planned Action EIS, Environmental Impact Statement from 2022. So that's just a big long list of plans. It was very helpful to go through with your own county staff and with the other governmental agencies so that we could update it. And once, you guys have had a chance to go through this and we get a more finalized version, I'm imagining that your staff will find a way to best share it with the public, and get it out there for any public participation and comments as well. After that, it moves into the vision statement, and that really hasn't changed yet, although I did get some feedback about recently from a member of the public about updating this vision statement. It didn't come out in the governmental meetings, but I got some great feedback about what it is that you want to be. A little bit of talk about the urban growth areas or rural areas and housing. We did add some information about middle housing. So when you heard from SCS Group, they have to, all the communities that are GMA are required to meet certain standards for the state that's out there. And when it comes to housing, they're requesting that all the communities have incorporated into their codes middle housing allowances. So when they say middle housing, what they're finding is that you have on one end of the spectrum, all your single family houses and then apartments. And that might be all your community has, but they said there's a whole bunch in the middle between the single family and the multifamily. You could have townhomes, you could have cottage housing, you could have stacked flats, you could have more mobile homes. And so they want each jurisdiction to have at least 5 of those as allowed uses somewhere in an appropriate zoning district that you work on together as a community to decide, okay, well, what are the right zonings for each of those? And they do have some certain requirements depending on your population size about. They have model ordinance language to incorporate into your code. And that's easy enough to just say, okay, well, let's put it in the code. The bigger conversation is the ones with the community members. Because you do want everybody to understand what's going on. So anyway, and in this, it's a larger overarching higher document to your code. There's reference to the middle housing right here in the red sentence. And we pulled this statement straight out of the state language, just so it'd be consistent, but it talks about single family houses that contain 2 or more attached, stacked or clustered homes, including duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, fiveplexes, sixplexes, townhouses, stacked flats, courtyard apartments, and cottage housing. So those are the options that they're throwing out there. So we're just saying if this is a thing that is available. But it's not going into any detail in the countywide planning policies. That is addressed in your code. So again, more background on environment and open space, and then a new paragraph on climate resilience and hazard mitigation. And we had pulled together a statement to add in here, and then this very last one in red was something that the fire marshal requested be added. Simply saying that Mason County will continue to implement the strategies identified in its hazard mitigation plan to lessen the impacts of natural disasters within the county. So there was a lot of good conversation about this topic. And really just making sure we're prepared to respond to the natural disasters in the community. And then it goes into more detail and it breaks down each of the planning policies and offers out different strategies for how to achieve those. So you start with urban growth is number 1. And so anything that's, in blue, it's track changes, that's new language. So there's that, it was brought up previously, but exploring the feasibility only, right, of establishing a new urban growth area around the unincorporated Union community. And that's in there just kind of as placeholder language for right now, because at the moment, they're just exploring it. We do have some SEJ staff that focus on utilities and capital improvements, looking at whether it's feasible. It may not be at all, but it was requested that we just do the research on there. And then also 1.3 is new, coordinate planning, zoning, and development standards in the Shelton urban growth area to ensure consistency with the development patterns, logical transition from urban to rural, and that there's adequate provision of infrastructure and services to facilitate annexation. So a lot of what's going to occur once there's decisions made about where the county and the city combined want to focus where the new housing will go, that will drive decisions about infrastructure investment, both with the utilities and the transportation. And so that will drive, so the housing chapter decisions made there will drive transportation, will drive capital facilities and utilities. And land use kind of goes into all of that. So it's a matter of deciding where things you would like to have them go. And the way it works, you have zoning in your county, you have zoning in your city, and if it's not zoned appropriately and you can't put high density there, if a developer's looking to build somewhere, then they just can't. And you do want to encourage the density to occur where infrastructure is available. Now, I do recognize, I've not been on this project for a long time, but in general, any community you go to, you have to make those tough decisions because you might get somebody that gets a good piece of property way out in the middle of nowhere and they come to the county, they want to develop it, but there's really no infrastructure and there's not the appropriate zoning. And is that appropriate? Is that the right thing to do to your community members when, you're going to be doing some sprawl? And so this state with the Growth Management Act has tried to preserve the rural areas and encourage the growth in the urban centers. So that's what we get to work. You guys have this awesome opportunity to work with Shelton on figuring out where you want the density to occur. They recognize as well as you do that this is going to be a challenge. I'm going back to what FCS group said, is to decide where you want the growth to go. And you need to go through the exercise of it, but it also doesn't mean that you got somebody knocking on the door waiting, but the growth is going to occur. So you just want to be prepared for it. For when I do show up, it might not be tomorrow, but it could be in 10 years. And I think y'all know as you have folks that work here or Well, you got folks that live in Olympia working here because they can't find housing here because it's not available. You know, I heard a lot of conversations with my Shelton interviews about what folks are doing for a living. So we need to try to find ways for folks to live here, but do it in a way that is responsive to what you have going on in this community. So that's a big, long takeoff from, you know, this new 1.3 that is being proposed. We just want to be really strategic with our urban growth areas and what we do with them. And then 1.6 is another one about the UGAs. It's about encouraging development in the urban growth areas where you do have services available. So you have public transit, emergency response, fire protection, schools, and other public services. So there's another bullet point here. It's also where services can be expanded through county action or via private investment from the developer. And we could have a whole other conversation another day about what all the infrastructure requirements are from developers. The second policy that comes straight from the state is to reduce sprawl, and I spoke to that a little bit. A lot of this is just kind of reorganizing where things are at within here. So this language that's here, double underlined, it would just move from elsewhere. It's not new language. There is a little bit that's new. But it's really just about establishing the fact that you want to maintain your rural character and reduce the sprawl. Because it's a lot more expensive to have sprawl. If somebody's trying to build 2 miles outside the city and they got to build a whole bunch of infrastructure to get there and you're passing a bunch of vacant land, that ends up costing any jurisdiction more money to maintain it. From anything, road, sewer, whatever it might be. You move into the third policy under transportation. We did add a new 3.1 in here in blue, and it's about coordinating multimodal transportation and with neighboring counties, tribes, and the city of Shelton to encourage efficient and aligning transportation with regional priorities. And really, honestly, I think that's just a rewrite. Yeah, as I'm looking at it. We did add a new 3.5 about promoting safety and security for the multimodal transportation system, and that's something that's related to housing. Now, if you do have housing that's being built, do you have adequate services for, you know, bus services? That's something that was brought up in the Shelton interviews. It's saying, you know, we'd like more bus stops, for instance, or a different route. I'm not saying that's going to happen, and that's not a decision that we make, but that's something that we can talk with the correct providers and make decisions based on where development is proposed to occur. Moving further down there, you have 3.10 through 3.13 that are all new and talking about how the local transportation plan should consider rail, marine, and aviation transportation, encouraging technological advances in the systems, and then protecting the systems and the assets through proper operation, maintenance, etc. Ensure it's providing safe, efficient services. Number 4 is housing, and this is a huge one. You know, a lot's just about coordination between the county and the city. It's about making sure there's an offering, it's a variety of housing types available. You address affordability, you try to eliminate any barriers to actually constructing housing, whether it's affordable or not affordable. You know, we had an interview with just a developer group, and it was just interesting to get their feedback on what's going on. And it was pointed out earlier that interest rates right now are a challenge for multifamily housing construction. But it's also a challenge for anyone looking to buy a house right now. People are waiting for interest rates to drop. So
Good luck with that.
yeah, and these are things you just identify, but we don't have control over a lot of it. And so what we can do from a jurisdiction's perspective is make sure your zoning regulations are set up, that you have a streamlined permitting process. And that if you're gonna have any requirements regarding the developer putting in infrastructure, that it's just all clearly outlined so that if somebody's looking to build here, they'll know what to expect and they can put together their budget and be able to plan for it. They tend to go to places that the development process is a little more predictable and understood. So there'll be some conversations probably about such topics as, you know, requirements for SEPA, you know, or the other option of the community to look at is impact fees. And I believe SEPA mitigation is the preferred route here. But when it comes to affordable housing, there's a whole lot in this section that could be a whole meeting in itself. This last one, 4.10. Housing plans and policies should prevent or mitigate the physical, economic, and cultural displacement of low-income households due to planning, public investments, private development, and market pressures. So that's something that needs to be tracked over time. Make sure that nobody's displaced as new housing comes on. And just come up with a tracking mechanism. This fifth policy for economic development. We've just kind of made a few revisions within here. But it's also really about just making sure that we're promoting the proper kind of economic development. This is a chapter we'll want to make sure Karen and her team is involved with here. You know, if you can hear, as I'm scrolling down, I'm just like glancing down at 5.8, supporting the school district, post-secondary and higher education efforts to include vocational training. That's already in here, but just making sure that we're hitting all different aspects of how to promote economic development. You have another policy that comes down from the state on property rights. This second one was added. It should say 6.2. But a private property must be acquired for public purposes, provide fair and market-based compensation negotiated during the acquisition process. That was just wanted to be pointed out by some folks. Number 7 is about permits. And this is across the board. You know, this was already in here and we didn't change this at all, but just make sure that planning permits are processed in a timely manner to do what I talked about earlier to ensure predictability. And that's one of the things that developers look at when they come to any community. What's the track record there? Number 8 is resource industries. And previously it didn't actually have any of these policies like further delved into here. It just had a statement, you know, talking about your existing industries of timber, agriculture, aquaculture, mining, and fisheries, and encourage conservation of productive forest lands. And then we've added 3 new policy statements. Number 9 is open space. And so, as I've repeatedly pointed out, you know, the state really wants us to preserve the rural lands, maintain open space, concentrate density in the urban areas. And so these are some statements about open space and developing recreational opportunities, which you have in abundance here, like access to. But what can you do to make sure it's available to the public? Talks about, these are already in here, designating open space areas, which you already have, making them accessible, which may not be as, they may not be accessible at the moment, but what can you do to make sure that you have more that is available? So I'm not gonna go into every single one of the bullet points that I keep putting out, I'm just gonna glance or gloss over it in a sense. It's not like nothing is important, or certain ones that I don't say aren't important, but I know for the sake of time, if you guys want me to stop at any point and have questions, please stop me.
We'll let you go all the way.
Yeah.
We'll save the questions till after your
Okay,
presentation.
we'll get through this, yeah, I don't wanna read everyone bullet. The environment is also a required policy from the GMA's perspective. You know, it's about striving to protect the environment, enhance the quality of life. And then we've got several statements right here. We added a new one. Encourage water reuse and reclamation for large-scale potable water users such as golf courses, parks, and schools, which is definitely a one that's being looked at around the state with water aquifer depletion. 11 is it used to read citizen participation. We're being deliberate and changing that to read public participation. And we made just a couple of edits to this one as well. Number 12 is facilities and services. And this is one where in 12.1 here, this section talks about making sure that there's an adequate public services and public facilities available to serve any new development that comes online. And 12.1, we've added this statement at the end, require concurrent provision of infrastructure and utilities where necessary. Consider assessing development fees in the form of environmental mitigation fees or impact fees for public services. That gets to the point of ensuring that as new development comes online, it won't be placed on the feet of the existing taxpayers to foot that bill. That the development will pay for the impacts that they are bringing on themselves. They will put in the infrastructure needed, and that there's a mechanism for assessing that. And so this is kind of a broad statement. It hasn't drilled down into the exact way of doing it, but this will say that as we write a new code, that is, or pieces of the code, that you'll want to make sure that you're meeting what's called a concurrency requirement. That use of concurrent provision. Just a couple more edits in there, and then number 13 is the section on historic preservation. And the Historic Preservation Commission requested that we add 13.3, which is consult with tribes and other governmental entities to ensure the protection of archaeological and culturally significant land sites and structures. It's always a great one to add. 14 is a brand new element that or policy. It's a new requirement from the state. And we have a statement here that kind of explains that, the GMA requires jurisdictions to ensure that the comp plans and the development regs and the regional policies address climate change and natural hazards, and that fosters resiliency, advances environmental justice, and protects and enhances the environment, economic and human health in the face of a changing climate. And there's language in here about coordinating hazard mitigation and community resilience with the city of Shelton, the tribes, the utility districts, and the fire districts, among others. And so these are all really important ones here. As I said, since it's a new chapter or section, I should say, there will be a new chapter in the comp plan. This is a policy in the countywide planning policy that will inform the new climate chapter of the comp plan. So these are broader statements. And then finally, number 15 is shorelines of the state. You already have a master shoreline program. And so this is just referring to that existing one, and it's nothing that you haven't heard before, I would imagine. So that is a really broad overview. I kind of went off on tangents on a few of the topics that I know are important to folks, but this is now your opportunity to throw questions at me or add, if you want to make any edits or propose any additions. What do you have to share?
I'll start. So, a few comments going through. So right at the top, the role of countywide planning, this is page 3. The fourth bullet, the comp plan shall reference and be coordinated with, and it lists every other plan, basically, a bunch of them. So my question is, it shall reference and be coordinated with, that's a very powerful statement. And that I'll say somewhat assumes all the other plans are coordinated to start with. Okay, and so I really look forward to how we're going to get that, and this will be a common theme with many of my comments. Shall, require, must, very inclusive, very exacting language. And might we consider softer language? I'm not directing anything, I'm just voicing my opinion.
Will and shall are mandatory.
I know, and very important because, so on page 7, I think this is very critical language. The climate mapping, Resilient Washington web tools provides data about potential. I repeat, potential changes in climate. And I think that's very important because deeper down, we use words of it is occurring. And so is it possibly occurring or is occurring? And then the engineer in me is going to tell me, and to what degree. It's, if we say it is occurring, and that's fine, the people will argue both sides. But do we plan for a degree Fahrenheit over a decade or over 50 years? And that's very, very different in how we prepare and how we think about all the many factors, add a couple of degrees here. How does that affect people? What about water rise? What about potential fire fire potential, et cetera? And how do we do the right things to protect the right assets, whatever those assets are? So when we use the word potential, I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just saying that there's a lot of, it could be a spirited discussion. And I'm just noting, we say potential, but then deeper down, we say it as if it is occurring. And there's a difference. So I see some differences as we go throughout here. Couple others that are pretty important here. Okay, homeowner associations will be encouraged to support compact, well-maintained housing areas. This is on page 11. And so my question is, what are we implying here that the county is going to do to encourage, is that punitive like in nature to encourage this? Is this, we're gonna give them a tax break? What are we talking about encouraging HOAs to have compact housing? So again, that's an open-ended question because it can be read as multiple ways. I'd like to understand what are we actually thinking here as we go through this. Sorry, Bob, I'll get there. That's fine, we can skip that. Paragraph 4, page 16, housing, the GMA, we scratch out encourages, but requires the availability of affordable housing. So are we required to have affordable housing regardless of what our citizens' income is? And according to this, we are required to provide that opportunity. Or do we want to encourage that opportunity? Again, like we the county are going to direct builders.
So,
So-
yeah, they're changing the regulations on that, which is why they have the middle housing requirements now,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Well,
Continue.
again, must, shall, requires your absolutes. And that's why I'm really struggling with, if we print this, how will this be interpreted in 3 years? Many of us will likely not even be in this room then. How will it be interpreted? Oh, look, this says thou shalt. And what can that put us into? We talk about in 4.6, we will now eliminate the barriers to construction of affordable housing. I'm not sure how we the county are going to eliminate barriers such as interest rates or the cost of labor or the availability of materials or the requirements for the environmental resiliency requirements. Those are going to be very challenging for us as a county to eliminate. We may be able to reduce.
That might be a better word to use.
Yeah, it might be.
And I'm not making any comments in here because my Zoom sharing thing is covering up my.
Yeah, no, that's,
editing ability.
I'm going very quick, but we can talk offside. This is a general comment. I would recommend we replace the word resident with citizen. We strike citizen and we put resident. They are different. We are here for the citizens of Mason County. Oh, 8.1, we are to maintain an inventory of productive and particularly productive natural resources. Is that a new requirement on the county that we are to now maintain said inventory? And what is there standards and requirements and staff? How are we going to do that? Because I don't necessarily see that coming with funding. Paragraph 11, deletes it public, replace it with citizen participation. The utilities discussion was very interesting. Because I know I've talked with people in this room that feel different, that we, the government, have a role in providing utilities or transportation to a development site. Others feel that no, that is a developer requirement. So this could be a very interesting offline discussion at some point. Yeah, I agree with the comments around just the table are fun. Yeah, again, the 14, we should discuss that first paragraph at some point. You know, again, the GMA requires us to ensure comp plans, development regulations, regional policies to address climate change, natural hazards, et cetera. And as we discussed 2 meetings ago, there are no standards as to what is happening. And it's very hard to come up with a policy when you don't have a wind load or a snow load or whatever, to use construction terms. All right, that's it.
Those are great comments. I appreciate it.
And we can cover
Go
them
ahead.
outside of this.
Right. So, like, we have these policies and I always have trouble with policies, objectives, goals, plans, all this kind of thing. A lot of the stuff in here, we don't have levels of service. So how's that gonna work? If this plan is really for the citizens of Mason County, I'm gonna have to read this a few more times. I get this feeling that our own planning, our own policy is not concurrent within itself. Because you have too many colliding requirements. Both, private, for private citizens, for the economic development and not so on and so forth. And as an example, I'm not against, mining gravel pits or what have you. Question is how many, you have a statement that says maintain and develop. So the question in my mind is, okay, so how many gravel pits are we gonna have? I don't wanna stop people from developing things, but at the same time, logging, well, clear cutting is one thing, but it does come back. It takes a while. Mining, you don't come back. Or at least as it was, you may mitigate it, do I can't think of the term, but remediation type project where you rebuild it in such a way that it develops, but I'm reminded of a gravel pit in Renton, city of Renton, on the just above the Cedar River. And that was a gravel pit for years and years and years, and then it got redeveloped and they got housing in there. I'm a little gun shy about how slopes and different things, how they got that all worked out. That's the city of Renton and that's their business. But what I'm concerned about is, okay, how are we gonna reclaim these development, these mining things over time as our population grows and you have them adjacent to urban growth areas, such like we do in a number of cases. I'm not, again, against gravel pits or, mining or what have you. I'm just saying that I'm having trouble seeing how that ties all together. And the bottom line is that, at least in a couple of readings, it seems like this is not concurrent in the sense that we're using concurrency. It seems like there's conflicts being developed here between regulatory people, citizens and business.
So the conflict's actually within the proposed text.
Right. But that's a big. So anyway, I don't know where you start there, but that's just my reading and saying, okay, this ought to be fun. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. It's a pretty big piece right there.
You haven't said a word, what you?
I'm soaking it all in, trying to figure out how it's gonna all mesh together.
There's a lot here.
I think you're right. There's a lot of lines that don't intersect.
Okay, Terry, are you still available? Are you doing something?
Yep, yep.
Got any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I had a question.
Sure.
To Will's point, is that something the state is requiring that we say the county is required to provide affordable housing? Because I'm very uncomfortable with the word required.
It's in the RCW.
That's something we have to do.
To accommodate.
Yeah.
We have to accommodate for it. So we have to have the zoning for it. We are not.
Like it.
We are building it.
But do we have to use the word the county is required to provide, so.
The key word's accommodate. And
Well,
actually, it's really position for is a better term.
It sounds like I'd be more comfortable replacing required with accommodate. To, the Will's point.
I mean, whatever the RCW wording is, I don't think you can change that. But
Well,
still,
that's my
you get
question.
your point.
Because the RCW say we have to use the word required. If we don't, I'm very uncomfortable with that word. I'm uncomfortable if it is required.
You're talking about the housing section where it says GMA encourages.
No, it's.
Well, it's changed to required. So GMA requires it. So they use specifically the word requires now instead of encourages. So it's talking about what the GMA of us.
What is the part you pointed out was the county is required, or did I get that wrong?
Maybe I misread it.
Sure again.
So you previously had a statement that said GMA encourages the available affordable housing, et cetera. And it was changed to required because of the state language. But we have in here, you already had prior to, in your old comp plan, this 4.1. Incentivize affordable housing. And then 4.2, the way it's worded, it's coordinate processes for supporting affordable housing between Mason County and the city of Shelton. Define and establish the need for affordable housing through the creation of the housing plan that provides for a mix of housing types for housing at all income levels. So like, that's a term used by the state, provide housing for all income levels. And then in 4.3 here, you got selecting innovative techniques to support affordable housing. So you get a lot of encouraging and supporting throughout it, and you only have that requirement statement really at the top.
And for the, if I may, for the county, this is more within the role of zoning to ensure that we can allow the different mixes of homes to sort of match the different types that we discussed earlier.
Yeah, so, and they're policy level, so they're important statements, but they're not the regulations, the actual code. And when you get down to this 4.10, it's like housing plans and policies should prevent or mitigate displacement. So when it comes down to it, let's just say somebody's going to sell a mobile home park. They actually have to give a lot of like 6 months notice to that kind of thing, because you can't just sell a mobile home park because you could be displacing a bunch of people. So there's this whole displacement effort that the state requires has to be gone through, like it's already a state law. So that's just an example. But if you're going to like go in and try to tear down some, I don't know, a couple of old houses and build something different.
But those are detail, sorry, I didn't mean to, those are details, you can't do bad stuff.
Yeah. So
But high level to say you're required to provide affordable housing, I don't even know if that can be done. I mean, you want to do everything we can to provide housing for all income levels, but.
And it does just say it requires the availability, but it doesn't say how much or who's gonna do it. It is all high level.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, but
Sorry to beat a dead horse.
no, actually, you brought up a good issue.
If anyone has proposed language, we can talk through it. I know you need a little more time to read it and absorb it.
Okay, no, cool.
You can't go against what the RCW says.
No, yeah. You have to do the RCW, whether it's stupid or not, but if you don't have to, I didn't like the word require from what I thought it was saying. Sorry.
Understood, that's fair.
Hey Brad, you still there?
Yep.
Got any questions?
No, I just put a couple comments in the chat that I believed Mason County is an autonomous body in itself, and we don't have to kowtow to the state.
That's wrong. We are given.
Why is it wrong?
authority through
Plenty
the-
other precedents.
Otherwise, we wouldn't exist.
The People's Republic of Mason County.
No, not a People's Republic, but a that indicates a communist.
Okay.
When I was talking to Randy Netherland about being on here, he asked me one question. Are you gonna follow the law? You have to.
We then changed the law,
Exactly.
start the what is it, referendum initiative? No, I can't remember. Can't remember my civics.
Okay, so as all the commissioners had their say.
No, this one has for
Yeah,
now.
I mean-
There's a ton of. tangents,
Yeah, you got more, I know.
But I'll stop.
We have opportunity to go through it some more and make comments and all
Yeah,
that, right?
absolutely.
Okay,
This is
cool.
not the
Anything
final
from staff?
version.
Okay. Let's hear from the public now. Step up to the podium.
When is this meeting going to end?
When we're done,
Could we put timetables on
Yeah.
agendas? So we know that we're staying to the meeting agenda?
Well, that's why it's suggested everybody stick with 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll watch for your
By the way, you have to identify yourself.
getting there. My name is Peggy Morrell. I live in Union, Washington. The views and opinions I'm about to express are my own. For the purpose of the minutes, I am not here representing any organization. This reflection. I really appreciated the language conversation that Mr. Harris initiated, and the two aspects of the community-wide planning policies document that I appreciated was the crosswalk, great table. It was really helpful. And the two pieces of that were number 11, which was the public engagement, active public participation, and number 14, which was the climate resilience and hazard mitigation piece. I have a feeling that this is more about edits to the document today than drilling down. So in the interest of time, that's what I'll address. So under number 11, the public participation, it says that it encourages the involvement of residents in the planning process and ensure coordination between communities and jurisdictions to reconcile conflicts. And so this is a direction to the county to encourage involvement. This goes to the language piece. That's incredibly nebulous. I come from a background of working for a land use and transportation planning agency, where when federal dollars were involved, which I don't believe is the case here, we were required to do public engagement. We went through a 3-day, 3-inch thick binder of how to do public engagement when using federal dollars. So when I see the word encourage, I'm concerned about that. I just want that called out for future draft considerations. But what we do have as using consultants, SCJ, is we do have a public participation plan. And we do have a scope of work between SCJ and the county around how they're recommending we support the climate resilience sub-element, which is required by the state. So those are the two pieces where I'd like to weigh in on specifically, since House Bill 1181 requires that climate resilience plan. And because of our, we are on a pathway 3 for the climate resilience element, it can and will be handled through the hazard mitigation plan. I've been in front of this group before and I've asked, is that plan even funded? No. Are there levels of service available to another comment made at this table? I believe it was you, about this long list of plans and documents that have to be coordinated with the comprehensive plan that requires staff in multiple agencies. I believe it says in the hazard mitigation plan, there's a nice matrix that says we don't have, well, you and I had that conversation. There is no level of service available for that coordination. So, and then the other one piece that is important to me is under the number 14, climate change and resiliency. It's the environmental justice piece. It says how to ensure that there's environmental justice. How are we addressing that when our climate resilience sub-element is in the hazard mitigation plan, which is not funded and does not have the levels of service to implement it? Those are the questions I wanted for the public record. And Kristen, I want to thank you for making that trip and for being here in person. That means a lot. I do have some very specific questions that I will forward to you rather than addressing tonight. And I wanted to thank the 3 of you for being here. Yay. I know it's hard. It's hard for adults, I think. So thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your summer. Guess we'll start yet. No. But summer, to be here tonight. It's so important what you're doing. And thank you, Julianne, for making this a great public engagement experience. That's it.
Thank you.
My name is Linda Links. I own a small shellfish farm on Tottenham. And I was all over this discussion about encourage, discourage, the language part of it. I think it was number 5.2, or it says maintain and enhance natural resource-based industries. Well, that's what a shellfish farm is, natural resource-based industry, right? Am I right? So we're supposed to encourage the conservation of productive natural resources and discourage incompatible uses. So an incompatible use would be something that would be built on, adjacent to, or near a natural resource. So, which could contribute to the demise of that natural resource. So that could be, so we're talking about resource extraction, agricultural lands, and the resource-based industries associated with these, well, shellfish. In other words, you have to be careful of what you encourage or discourage nearby any kind of shellfish lands. And I have a lot more to talk about shellfish, but not tonight. It's late. Thank you.
No, thank you. Anyone else?
Speaking, I'm Julianne again, speaking to the concurrency piece. I think it's really important that we consider climate impacts in every aspect, not just in its own chapter. And in the section that we do talk about climate impacts, I think it's important to flesh out some of the details of that, like the cultural impacts, the impacts on aquaculture. Like I used to work for an oyster farm, and ocean acidification is making it so Pacific oysters aren't going to be able to survive in the way that actually the native oysters, Olympia oysters, will, but our industry is based on Pacific oysters. There's also the health impacts, the mental health impacts, environmental justice considerations, hunting, fishing, subsistence, gathering, lots of things to consider here. I really appreciate the change in the planning policies from citizen to resident, because I think we need to consider all the people that live here. I also appreciate the public participation part, and I really think that should be strengthened. And I think we'll all benefit from that, because when you have good public participation, you get public buy-in. And then you don't have as many angry people coming to yell at you because they didn't know this thing was going to happen and they're mad that it happened. It's the thing that we agree on together, because we all love where we live and we want it to be a good place. Another question I had is, you know, having worked in organizational change and in nonprofit administration, in many cases, we run an evaluation of what was the plan 10 years ago, how far did we get on it, and what were the results, and then we make a new plan. And it could be because I'm new, maybe all the staff have done that already, and I apologize if you have. But as a newcomer to this process, I see the 2016 plan and I see the edits, but I'm unclear what has been achieved in the last 8 years. And I would love to know that, to be able to provide more thoughtful feedback and input. I guess one other thing I want to say on the citizen and resident issue, this is an issue of equity and racial justice. And so I think that we have to be really thoughtful about that. If we're trying to exclude folks who don't live here full time because they're not invested enough, because they're seasonal folks, or they, you know, that's a different story. But everyone who lives here full time pays sales tax, contributes to our community, provides labor, raises children, is invested in our community, and we need to honor that. And then my final question is, what's the timeline for comments? We're doing our very best to read hundreds of pages every week to try to have thoughtful comments. And I imagine it's hard for everybody in the room here to keep up with this pace. And so as much as possible, knowing what the timeline is and what the priorities are, like what's the fluff and what's the substance, would be really helpful, so that we can do the most meaningful work with the time that we have. And again, appreciate what Peggy said. Thank you so much for driving all the way down here. I didn't realize you hadn't moved yet. It very soon. It's everything to be able to be in the same room with each other. It really makes a difference, and I'm really hoping that the ongoing public participation is about all of us being with many of our neighbors of very different backgrounds and different ages and different heritages all together to make a shared plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
On timing, I'll have to get with staff and we can make sure that we agree together. That would be
Great. Give us not just like, hey, it's due tomorrow, but like a little time so that we can actually do the work thoughtfully with as many people as possible.
Okay, Francesca having her hand up online. I don't know if she still has comments.
I do. I was just wondering, there was a climate advisory team that was supposed to be formed. And I was wondering what happened to that? And is it going to be meeting again or not?
Well, I'll just speak from SCJ Alliance's perspective, the folks that were involved in that, one of them has left and I am now going to be taking over that as well, but I also have 2 new team members I just brought on, I've been training them and we are gonna form your new team, you get all these new people. And we are gonna also bring in Alicia Ayers, who was previously involved. But she's like my supervisor and she's just kind of more high level, but she was involved in this soon, so we are gonna be meeting this week to kind of flesh out our plans for getting that kicked off again. As a matter of getting us access to the previous employees' emails and seeing what kind of conversations already occurred, et cetera, but it's not forgotten, it just kind of got put on hold while all of us new staff were brought on board. So thank you for your patience.
I just. So Constance Ibsen, so just because I'm here and I thought of these things, is that I hope that as we're looking at all this feasibility and concurrency, that you involve the state transportation. Because I think we have like about 300 miles of main roads that are state roads. So most of them we seem to use as main streets. And also, I do not believe that we have this countywide drinking water kind of assessment and availability plan like a lot of counties have. We don't have that. And it would be nice to gather together as much as we have about what is the quantity of the drinking water, where it is the population there, that kind of stuff. And also, I had sent some stuff, I think, to Marissa about a year ago, is that I would like to have that be sure to include the hazardous or the places that have just been that are toxic and that are on the toxic cleanup list, that you have those and you have the map, because as we deal with environmental justice, I mean, we shouldn't be putting you know, affordable housing for veterans down in the old Rainier area and that soil that's all contaminated and other places. So I think that needs to be there just so people are aware that those sites are there.
Okay, if there are no further comments to be made by anybody, should we call it a night?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Please take some